From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Carla Gonzalez. Our top story: stock markets are responding to two major events unfolding around the world. News is emerging from the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries as they meet in Austria, whilst Chinese firm Huawei's chief financial officer has been arrested in Canada, affecting markets dramatically. The price of oil has dropped by at least 4% after Saudi Arabia suggested that producing countries might cut output by less than expected. Meanwhile, the arrest of Meng Wanzhou, who could be extradited to the United States, threatens to destabilize already fraught relations between China and the U.S. Representatives from the 15 member states of OPEC are meeting. The United States has been putting pressure on Saudi Arabia to keep prices low. Ahead of the meeting, there was a consensus that production should be cut to prevent a further fall in prices, but not on how much.
Did you recommend a cut?
Well, the cut, yes, but we haven't discussed the number.
Is there a number?
Not yet. Work in progress.
But you recommended a cut.
Huh?
Did you recommend a cut?
We all did.
Oh,
There's
you
a
all did.
consensus.
And China has condemned the arrest of Huawei's chief financial officer Wanzhou by Canadian authorities on behalf of the United States. A statement by the country's foreign ministry has demanded an explanation from the U.S. and Canada. It added that the arrest was a violation of Meng's human rights and demanded her immediate release. The U.S. had been investigating Huawei for alleged violations of sanctions against Iran.
We demand the other side to provide an explanation for the detention and for the immediate release of the relevant person. The detention, without giving any reason, violates the human rights of the person detained.
Meng is the daughter of the founder of Huawei, one of the largest telecommunications equipment companies in the world. It recently overtook Apple to become the second biggest smartphone maker after Samsung. Meng's arrest has put doubts on the 90-day trade truce that was agreed between Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit in Argentina. Just ahead of that OPEC meeting in Vienna, leaders of two major producing countries met in Moscow. Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro held talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Our correspondent was there.
The aim was to strengthen an already close relationship. The presidents of Russia and Venezuela met at the government residence in Novo Ogaryovo, just outside Moscow.
We have settled on the best way forward. We are putting into action a wide-ranging economic program which fits perfectly into our shared vision of cooperation between Russia and Venezuela.
President Putin condemned the pressure exerted by some foreign governments to promote violence against the Bolivarian revolution, including the failed assassination attempt against President Maduro and his ministers on August the 4th in Caracas.
We support your efforts to reach a mutual understanding in Venezuela and to establish relations with the opposition. We condemn any acts of a clearly terrorist nature and any attempt to change the situation by force.
I am very happy to be here, and I know things will only get better in the future. We are standing up and resisting. We have suffered all kinds of aggression and threats, and this has been a learning process.
The strategic relation between these two countries includes areas like energy and mineral exploration, as well as technical, military, educational and cultural collaboration. According to the Kremlin, trade and other economic exchanges between the two countries totaled $68.4 million in 2017. And in the first 9 months of this year, that increased to more than $79 million. A sign that the ties between Russia and Venezuela are growing stronger.
Students in Colombia are holding more protests over the lack of funding for public universities. Students, along with trade unions and other social movements, have been protesting for weeks against the government of President Iván Duque. Many of the demonstrations have been met with fierce repression from the police. The students say the government has the money to boost the education budget, but that it lacks the political will. Thousands of women marched in Argentina on Wednesday evening against a court's decision on the rape and murder of the teenager Lucia Perez. The women marched through Buenos Aires as part of a nationwide women's strike after the two accused men were found not guilty last week. The court said their guilt could not be proven, despite the fact that they offered drugs to Lucia and took her to their home. Feminist groups say this is additional proof of the lack of a gender perspective within the judiciary.
We are again demanding justice, to say that we will continue to confront this patriarchal justice.
And some of these women staged a die-in protest to highlight one of the slogans of the protest, "We are all Lucia." The court found the two men guilty only of drug possession. The case has caused outrage in Argentina, where the women's movement has grown dramatically in recent years. Lucia's mother spoke to the crowd and told them that the court had violated her 16-year-old daughter after she was dead.
My daughter was raped after dying. After her death, my daughter was raped. They raped her to death. They drugged her to death. The judges were the final ones to rape her. The judges raped her with the sentence they handed out. That's what the judiciary in Mar del Plata have done.
At least 4 people have been killed in the Dominican Republic in an explosion at a plastics factory. Fire crews and the army rushed to the scene in the capital, Santo Domingo, to search for anyone trapped in the debris. The head of the fire brigade said the blast was caused by a gas leak inside the plant. President Danilo Medina promised support for the families of the victims. Classes were suspended at schools in the vicinity. Jamaica's government is vowing to take action after a damning report of the Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica and its affiliate Petrojam that has uncovered explicit acts of nepotism at both entities. The Auditor General's report has also pointed to serious deficiencies in human resource recruitment and management practices. The probe also found that state-owned oil company Petrojam made questionable payments related to the procurement activities. In response, Prime Minister Andrew Holness says his government welcomes the report and will take further actions.
What has caught my eye of great interest is the issue with the pricing. That is something that we will have to take a very serious look at. Issues to do with infrugality of the use of public resources, that has to also be addressed. I believe that you could say that this is a watershed moment for transparency and accountability in Jamaica. The government welcomes the report and will take further action as recommended and guided by the report.
More stories coming up. We'll be back.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. In Tijuana, Mexico, migrant caravan members are lashing out at local government authorities for abandoning them.
For Jesus, the trip that began almost 2 months ago from his home in Honduras is not over. As he walks along the streets of Mexico, he now feels compelled to stay there.
Tijuana is a very beautiful place with many sources of employment, and all you need is willpower and encouragement. That's why we came here, to work, and since they opened their doors, we are not going to lose out on this golden opportunity.
17 days ago, migrants sought shelter in a sporting complex located in the north of the country. More than 5,000 people stayed there, including families with small children.
People here have supported us a lot, and they give us work. They do ask for the migration documents, that is, the work permits, but they are still willing to give us a chance.
However, the local government has tried to have them move to another shelter, located more than 15 kilometers away. The closure of this shelter has left many without a place to rest their heads at night.
We do not have enough money to pay for round-trip tickets, right? For the people that got jobs here, it's better than going back and forth.
The migrants say local government has been pressuring them to relocate.
They are trying to punish us. They want to pressure us into submission. The truth is that when aid comes, they are not allowed to enter, so we are unable to access the services we so desperately need. And we are hungry. We are even without basic amenities, like toilets. We have no water. Imagine we have been punished, and this is the government's policy.
More than 500 people remain on the streets around the Benito Juarez sports complex. After more than 4,000 kilometers, Central American migrants continue to face difficult conditions, ironically, in their bid to live a life of dignity.
Pablo Pérez García, Telesur, México.
Unaccompanied minors from the migrant caravan have spoken on their hopes for a better life in the U.S. One of the cases is a teen from Honduras who was forced to flee after a gang killed his brother and threatened his life. He's hoping to find work in the U.S. Another one is a young teenage girl from El Salvador who escaped an abusive family and hopes to reunite with a relative. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has justified his hardline policy against the caravan because he believes they are criminals. They are part of a group of more than 7,000 migrants at the border, with hundreds more making their way to Mexico.
My mother said that I called me. I explained the circumstance I was going through. I was assaulted. They beat me up. They robbed me, took my clothes, beat me up badly. Last time, they threatened me. Those who killed my brother kept threatening me too. So I said I want to come here because I was at risk there. They helped me out. They pray for me. Thanks to God, I am good and at the border.
Mum didn't know that I was abused by my grandmother. I told Mum that I wanted to come here. My sister also helped me. She said she would. My mum also helped me to come here. I told her that I was scared to be in El Salvador, and once in the United States, I would help her by sending money.
Newly inaugurated Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has confirmed that he will be speaking to President Donald Trump about the migrant crisis.
President Trump sent us congratulations on Monday, and we are maintaining a permanent communication. And it is good. Relations are good. We will likely get in touch with President Trump for this special matter, the one that has to do with the migratory phenomenon.
We continue in Mexico. The capital city's first female mayor has been sworn in. As a member of the country's left-wing Morena party, Claudia Sheinbaum has vowed to put an end to the persecution of the country's opposition. The new mayor is also a scientist and was part of a UN climate change panel that won the Nobel Prize for Peace in 2007.
Therefore, the first thing we will do is stop the abuse. From now on, democracy and political freedom are restored. Never again will we exercise or allow persecution and direct or stimulate violence against those who think and act in a way different to whoever is governing.
Climate negotiators are continuing their discussions behind closed doors at the COP24 conference in Poland. But outside the main meetings, climate change activists have put on their own mock awards to bring attention to the insincerity and hypocrisy of some of the participants. The mock Fossil Fuel of the Day award was unanimously given to Saudi Arabia. Churches in Peru have come together to form a joint initiative to save the Peruvian Amazon rainforest. The initiative comes a year after the Pope expressed concern about the alarming deforestation of the Amazon, which covers almost 2/3 of the country. The Peruvian Amazon has in recent years experienced high rates of deforestation due to gold mining. This is a key factor behind global warming, accounting for around 15% of annual emissions of heat-trapping gases.
I think that we're doing something in looking to create awareness about how important the Amazon is. Not just for those who live there, but for the whole country. And not just for the country, but for the whole world, really.
Indigenous communities in Colombia are demonstrating against human rights abuses and are demanding government protection. They have decided to take to the streets. They want justice and security so that they don't live in fear. At least 34 community leaders of the Agua indigenous people have been killed this year alone.
We have been abandoned and our needs are superiors. Who shows up when we resist? Armed groups. And when we resist to defend our territory and culture is when we are threatened and killed.
This region, especially Ricaurte, Tumaco, and Barbacoas, has a strong presence of armed groups that are operating on the ground. They have threatened us, resulting in the murder of 3 people. Communities are on the streets waiting for the government to solve this.
Mass public sector layoffs in Chile continue, with more than 2,000 workers losing their jobs nationwide. Public workers have gathered outside La Moneda Palace demanding answers to what they say is an unfair dismissal. Workers say President Sebastián Piñera has put at risk social programs that helped the most vulnerable. And there is serious concerns about the increasing rates of HIV infection among young men and women in Bolivia. Statistics show that people between the ages of 15 and 24 make up 1/3 of all newly diagnosed HIV infections.
All kinds of sources are important to warn about the risks of getting infected with HIV and develop AIDS.
Every year, there are over 2 million new infections, around 1,800,000 according to the most prudent estimations. In these times, nobody should be dying because of AIDS, but we still have almost 1 million deaths in the world.
In Bolivia, just as worldwide, the incidence of HIV cases have been reduced. However, authorities are concerned about the increase of cases in the young population.
We are working with people between 15 and 29 years old. In this group, young people, cases are increasing. 10 years ago, they made up just 28% of the cases. Today, they make 33%. Policies should be addressed for them.
Since the HIV was identified around 20 years ago, science had made important improvements in the development of treatments to detect and stop the disease.
Just some years ago, one patient used to need around 25 pills per day. Now he can just take one antiretroviral pill a day. This has made things easier for the patient and also for the health system.
The HIV and AIDS campaign promotes tests so people can find out if they have got infected. The Bolivian government covers 97% of the treatment needed. Around 20,000 Bolivians have HIV. 10,000 receive free care.
5 years after his death, the spirit of Nelson Mandela lives on in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. The Latin American country paid tribute to the renowned freedom fighter and statesman at the National Theatre in Caracas. The South African ambassador used the event to express his country's desire to deepen strong bilateral relations. He added that the roots of conflict and hostility lie in poverty, exclusion, and marginalization. We're taking one last break, but stay with us.
infested by inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice. The American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deepening into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on Telesur.
And we're back. Protests have continued in France against President Emmanuel Macron's economic reforms and the deteriorating conditions of living. Police in Nantes used tear gas grenades to disperse students who had blocked the entrance to their school and set a car on fire. The Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, announced on Wednesday that he was calling off the fuel tax increases planned for 2019, in what many saw as a desperate bid to end the protests which have rocked the country. A car bomb blast outside a police station in Iran has left at least 4 people dead and dozens injured. According to local sources, a suicide bomber placed explosives inside a truck and blew himself up after being stopped at the police headquarters. No group has confirmed responsibility for the attack so far. Rwanda's High Court has acquitted opposition leader Diane Rwigara and her mother of charges that included inciting insurrection and forgery. Rwigara has repeatedly accused President Paul Kagame of dissent. She also criticized his Rwandan Patriotic Front's grip on power since it assumed control after ending the country's 1994 genocide. She was arrested shortly after declaring her interest in running against Kagame in the 2017 elections. The government of Burundi has ordered the United Nations Human Rights Council to shut its office in the country within 2 months. Burundi has been at loggerheads with the UN since 2016, when the UN released a report warning of a risk of genocide, claiming systematic human rights abuses by the government. Burundi has been embroiled in a political crisis since President Pierre Nkurunziza announced his candidacy for a controversial third term in April 2015. Uganda has vaccinated thousands of health workers to prevent Ebola and stop the deadly virus from spreading to neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo.
To date, we have over 3,000 health workers already vaccinated because we are worried. So we have not waited for the first case to come in. We have already had them vaccinated, and the vaccination is continuing.
Participants in the Global Forum on Migration and Development in Morocco are trying to convince member countries to sign the UN Migration Pact. The non-binding agreement is set to be adopted next week. The pact has been facing growing opposition from countries such as the United States, Australia, Hungary, and the Dominican Republic. It identifies human rights principles and suggests ways for territories to cope with migration. It also prohibits arbitrary detentions and only allows arrests as a last resort.
There are a lot of people still hesitating, who don't want to see that it's a compact for safe, orderly and regular immigration. It has nothing to do with an invitation to illegal immigration. No, these are clear positions against illegal migration.
The UN Children's Fund has warned that about 1.5 million children in the Central African Republic are in desperate need of humanitarian aid. UNICEF says that children in the country are in danger of being recruited by armed groups or becoming victims of sexual violence. Since the president was overthrown in 2013, the country has been plagued with violence and armed clashes between Christian and Muslim groups.
5 years of armed conflict means that the children are in need of aid in essentially all areas today. They are in need of aid from birth until their early childhood in order to have access to primary health and nutrition care. When they are a little older, they need to go to school. They need to be protected against being recruited by armed groups.
The president of Senegal, Macky Sall, has inaugurated the Black Civilizations Museum in the capital, Dakar. The museum has been described as the largest of its kind and has the capacity to hold up to 18,000 exhibits. The exhibition halls include the show Africa Now, showcasing contemporary African art, and the Caravan and the Caravel, which tells the story of slave trade across the Atlantic and through the Sahara, giving rise to new communities of Africans in the Americas. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But this and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And we're also on social media, so go ahead and follow us. I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching Telesur.